What up, what up? Welcome on in to Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. On today's show, we're discussing what the week has looked like for Baylor Softball as they get ready to head to Gainesville, Florida for the Super Regionals coming up this weekend. Don't forget, you can catch Inside Baylor Sports every weekday. You can also watch the video version for free over at BaylorPlus.com and on the Baylor Athletics YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, rate, and review the pod. And follow Baylor Plus today on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. It's the official content network of Baylor Athletics. Think Netflix for your Baylor Bears. Download the app on your mobile device and sign up for your free 7-day trial today at BaylorPlus.com. It's Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. Justin Hoff alongside Corey Bolts, and we're getting so close to the weekend. We know Friday at 11 o'clock on ESPN2, it's the Baylor Bears going up against the Florida Gators in the Super Regionals. That we do know, but what we don't know is all the work that was put in to getting to Gainesville. Take us inside the program, Corey, as the setup. You win on Sunday against Louisiana, and what does it look like after that?
Yeah, it's a quick turnaround, Justin, and I don't know that a lot of people understand the behind the scenes piece of it. You just see teams show up ready to play. And what happens is after you have the games on Sunday, later that evening, we receive an email from the NCAA outlining this is where you're going. So we got information about the Gainesville Regional. We got communication about travel, and we had to have all of that stuff ironed out by end of day Monday. So Danny and I are on the bus from Louisiana back to Texas, and we are sitting with each other and talking through what we need to do for travel, talking through the options. Ironically enough, my first year as a sport administrator of softball, we traveled to Gainesville, and that was for a regional, not a super regional, but I just remember how that travel was. So I knew what questions to ask this time around to make sure that we didn't end up with a 14-hour travel day like we did the first time. So we're asking questions back and forth. A lot of people aren't working on a Sunday evening at 10 p.m., 11 p.m. So some of the questions and information we needed had to wait until Monday, but a lot of conversations with Shorts Travel and the NCAA regarding our transportation options. And that's only one small piece of the puzzle. The nice thing is that when you're going to regionals or super regionals, the host institution has already secured hotels and things like that for you. So all we have to do is send over rooming lists versus trying to have to find hotels. So that's helpful. So hotels were handled. We figured out flights and everything by end of the day Monday. And we then have to start building, not we, Danny, do it all Danny is what the team calls her, but Danny then had to start working on itineraries based on, like you mentioned, Justin, game time for Friday, and that game time being earlier than we have been playing. So making sure that we have a good plan in place for how we're preparing 2 days in advance, not just the day before. So Danny gets to work on that in concert with the rest of our coaching staff to ensure that we have a good plan in place. And she gave me that itinerary, not yesterday, but I'm losing track of my days here. Today's Thursday. She gave me that itinerary on Tuesday and had me just double check some things. But there's the ops folks for these programs are doing a whole lot of work in a 24-hour period, trying to make sure that everything is together. And then that doesn't even mention communication to parents that may want to travel with us and be in the same hotel, or additional communication about tickets to the student athletes so that they can make sure we have the right people on the pass list, or other members of the athletic department that are traveling with us but wouldn't be part of what would be called the competition roster travel party. So just lots of moving pieces, and hats off to Danny Price, our director of operations, because she handles it all with grace and makes sure that everything is taken care of. But there's a lot. And what's most important, and this is what I kept talking to Danny about as we've gone through this process, what's most important in all of this, Justin, is the health and well-being of our student athletes as they're traveling, and best positioning them to be successful on the field on Friday. And one of the things that we learned from that first year with me being with softball was that the 14-hour travel day, because our flight was delayed from Dallas to Jacksonville, but the 14-hour travel day did not bode well for us. We lost a whole day of preparation. Team was tired, and it was a bit of an uphill battle to try to get us back to where we needed to be. So our travel this year will be about 5 hours in comparison to 12. Maybe not even 5 full hours. Maybe more, probably honestly it's closer to 4.5. So so grateful that we were able to figure that out for the team and better position them to be ready to play on Friday. But lots of behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, it's wild to think about. And for us, we've been in this business for a long time, so it becomes second nature, and we just kind of assume everybody knows. But a lot of people on the outside don't know. There's quite a business and quite a operations to getting everything done. I mean, I know people will, flip the channel on Friday and be like, oh, they just showed up, and that's the only focus they have is just the game. But there's so much more than just the game and getting everyone ready and positioned for success, as you said. But yeah, it's quite an undertaking, right? And to get it done and to get to Gainesville and to feel good about where you're at and positioned for success has to be a great feeling. Almost for Danny, not to speak for her, but it's almost like a wedding planner a little bit, all that work you have to do to get ready and get, a lot of people in the same area.
It really is, though. She has so many moving pieces, and the things that make it additionally challenging as I think about this. So regionals is a little bit easier in scheduling in that there are 2, maybe 3 games. Super regionals, 2, maybe 3 games. And last weekend with regionals, because there's so much uncertainty around what games you win, what games you may lose, and it's double elimination, trying to plan around that was a task. So she's having to make, I call them last minute, but it wasn't last minute because we were ill prepared. It was just last minute because we didn't know how the weekend would unfold, but having to make last minute calls to restaurants for food and trying to double check with our bus driver to make sure that we haven't gone over her hours in the event that we need to leave on a Saturday versus leaving on a Sunday. And if we are leaving on Sunday, have you driven too much hours earlier in the day that prevents you from driving the 6 hours that we need to get home? And if so, how do we need to adjust? So there's so many little things. I think Danny will appreciate the super regionals this weekend because there are less unknowns, given that you definitely have a game Friday, you definitely have a game Saturday. We already know the times of those games, so you can plan around it. And then what's TBD is what happens after Saturday, which is only one day of Sunday. So, gosh, a lot of pieces, but the team does a great job of rolling with the flow because they know the level of change and adaptation that's necessary and needed. But yeah, it's interesting to liken it to planning a wedding because there are just so many small things that you think about and try to make sure you're considering as you're planning everything. And inevitably, sometimes things will get missed or things may not be thought of, but that's why you have a team of people to ask the questions and to check in on things to make sure that we have dotted all our I's and crossed all of our T's and that we're ready to go. So fun times.
Well, Corey's in the mix. So with you being in the mix, we know things are going to go great and they're going to be good. And so you get ready for Friday and talk about the TV times, the game times, and obviously dictated typically by TV where you're set up there. So, I think a lot of fans just think about football for that, but it lays down the rest of the way. And this is a big thing. I mean, there's a lot of viewership for the softball NCAA championships. We've seen the spike in women's sports, softball, women's basketball, volleyball over the last couple of years, but gets underway tomorrow at 11 a.m. So an early riser. We don't play too many 11 a.m. Friday games. There could be a couple maybe early in the season, some of those tournaments. But for the most part, it's unique. It's probably going to feel like a Saturday for most out there.
Yeah, for our team, especially most of our we've only had a handful of 11 a.m. games. Usually we're playing at 12 p.m. Central or 1 p.m. Central, and that's usually on Sundays. So to your point, the feeling of playing that early on a Friday will be different, but we had zero control over game times because, as you mentioned, Justin, all of the times were set by our TV providers. So the benefit of being able to play in the Super is that the games are aired on linear television. So you'll be on ESPN2. I don't remember which other platform is covering it, but the reality, I know we're on ESPN2, so that's why it's top of mind. But while that's the benefit, that then means that you'll have games starting as early as 11 a.m. Central to make sure that you can get all of those games in. And on Friday, you'll end up with 8 games being played that need to be shown on television. So I think there's a lot of different things that go into that. But the reality is when we're in postseason, and we talked about this a little bit when we were talking basketball earlier in the year, as they had some early games and some late games. But when you're in postseason, it don't matter what time you're playing. Like the teams are amped and ready to go and get out there and get after it. There will need to be reminders about rest and making sure you get to bed at a good time on Thursday so that we're prepared and ready to go on Friday. But noon on Friday, it'd be no different. I shouldn't say no different. It shouldn't feel much different than how their days would typically go, because when we're on the road, coach has the team wake up and requires breakfast, so people aren't just sleeping in and getting a late start to the day. So instead of wake up, breakfast, and practice, it'll be wake up, breakfast is your pregame, and now we're getting ready to play a game. So a little bit different, but in terms of how days have flowed for the team, it shouldn't feel that much different than what they're accustomed to when they're on the road. Now,
Yeah.
Saturday's game will be that would be a little bit of adjustment, because that is a true 11 a.m. start Eastern, which would be 10 a.m. Central. So I think that one will be one that feels a little bit different, but they'd have the rest of Friday to get some rest in. So hopefully they'll be ready to play on Saturday.
Yeah, and the challenge here, just a couple points off of what you mentioned there, Corey. Linear, meaning kind of traditional cable, to put it more, in layman's terms. So you're looking at ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU. ESPN Plus is more on the digital side, streaming, obviously the future, right? The future, and there'll be one day where everything will be available on there, one day in the not too distant future. I could see that happening, where all the networks and all the sports you can get on one platform. So that day will come at some point, but lots of different viewing options. So yes, like being on ESPN2, obviously linear traditional cable is a little bit more traditional. So you're going to have a few more viewers, and you always want the more viewers, the better. And so looking forward to that. But yes, you think about the softball championships, there's teams all over the country here. And so you think about the time zones, that comes into play. So if you're going to play out in the Eastern time zone, you're clearly going to play earlier games.
Yep.
You got the East, you got the Central, you got the Mountain, Central being the best, as we've talked about many times. And then you got the West Coast. West Coast, obviously, anytime you play in the West Coast, and this is something for us to remember into next year, when we have some West Coast schools, that means your games are going to be later because of that viewing window. And so, yes, you go out to the East Coast, naturally, you're not going to be playing Florida at 8 o'clock Central time, okay, p.m. You're not going to be doing that. You're going to be playing the morning. So 11 a.m., as Corey said, on Friday, 10 a.m. on Saturday. And the key here, I know Jerry and I will talk about it on tomorrow's show. We'll talk about stats and go through the numbers and all that kind of good stuff. The Big 12 versus SEC, which is always a fun battle. Looking forward to that. These two best softball conferences going head-to-head, Corey. I mean, this means something. We talked about it throughout the season. Big 12 pride. If you're any school in the Big 12, you want to root for the Baylor Bears this weekend, because you want the Big 12 to have the upper hand over the SEC.
100%. And one of the things I shared, I got a nice note from Dana, who works at the Big 12 conference office, and she's been our primary point of contact for the SWA. So she sent a text and she congratulated us on making it to Super Regionals. And as I looked at all of the 16 teams in supers, I said, Dana, Big 12 is 1/4 of the teams in super regionals. That's something that we now don't know how many the SEC has, so I didn't do that math. I only was focusing on us, but I think it's amazing to have 4 teams represented in the supers. And to your point, Justin, these 2 conferences are the conferences of focus when you're talking about softball and successful softball. And the SEC and the Big 12 are the 2 strongest RPI conferences for softball. They've gone back and forth in terms of being number 1 versus number 2 and for strength of schedule as a collective. So I anticipate a challenge for sure, but I anticipate a good fight, and I'm looking forward to Baylor playing their game. That's what Coach Moore continues to emphasize in press conferences, emphasize with the team. Yes, we'll scout and do all that we need to do. We'll watch film and do all of that. But at the end of the day, Baylor has to play their game, and they have to show up and do the things that they can do that have made us successful while adjusting to the people that we're competing against. And I think those 2 things will be critically important, handling the assignments for what we see on film and what we know we need to be prepared for, but then playing our game. And we've been battle tested a lot this season. We've had some significant challenges in some games this season, but my hope is that the team is able to play with a certain level of confidence, knowing that they've been tested and succeeded. So might as well go out there and leave it all out on the field and do what you need to do, and continue to lean into that resilience and that togetherness that they have leaned on this past weekend and the last few weeks to help them be successful this upcoming weekend. But yeah, there's nothing more that you want to see if you're a softball fan than a Big 12 SEC matchup, especially at this time of the year.
Yeah, and with the weather this weekend, it's going to be warm there in Gainesville, Florida, as expected. It's warm here in Waco, Texas. You go in the south, it's going to be warm. 91 on Friday, 92 on Saturday, 95 on Sunday. But you're playing in the morning, which should be in the 80s. So it should be pretty nice weather. You're happy about that instead of playing at 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock in the heat of the day. But a final item here, Corey, that first game. We know first impressions are so big just in life. But that first game in a 3-game series is critical. I mean, that game right there. You win that, you have the upper hand. You know you're going to Sunday. You got 2 games to play and only need 1 win. I don't know what Coach Moore says. I think most people know how important that first game is. But, man, for our audience out there, wanted to let them know game 1 is critical.
I don't know that it can be emphasized enough. Game 1 is extremely important. It's the same thing we talked about last weekend. Winning the first game is the key to success. It puts you in a good spot. It gives you more opportunities to come out successful. If you don't win that first game, you're battling from behind the entire rest of the weekend. Same would be true for this past weekend with regional. So we were taking it a game at a time. We said we have to get the first game. We got the first game. And then coach said, work's not done. You have to get the second game. Otherwise, it's going to be a hard climb back to the games on Sunday. We're blessed to get the second game. And then that put us in a great position because we had 2 games to give us the opportunity to win on Sunday, which we ended up doing. This weekend is no different. We have to have the first game. Now, is it impossible to come back and get those second games and win out? Not at all. It's absolutely possible. We've seen it happen year after year. But you don't want to put yourself in that position. In an ideal situation, you would give yourself a win in that first game. And that way, the ball is in your court. Different analogy because I was a basketball player, but the ball is in your court and you're able to play with a different level of freedom versus having to play from behind. So my hope is that the team comes out swinging and we get it done on day one so that we can be better positioned for day 2 and day 3. And there's nothing better. We've talked about this all year, Justin, and you know how I feel about this. But there is nothing better than being at somebody else's home and the crowd is rowdy and they get real quiet. Like, there's just nothing better. There's nothing better, especially when you come in as an underdog and people don't expect that you'll compete or don't expect that you'll come out victorious. So I'm ready to silence some folks and am looking forward to being able to make some noise this weekend in a good way.
Well, Corey, send our well wishes to the team. I know all the Baylor family will be tuning in on Friday at 11 a.m. I will not be doing a lot of work. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna be focused in. I'll multitask a little bit. My wife says I'm not great at that, but I'll try to do what I can. I'll try to do what I can, but I'll be tuned in. And good luck this weekend. Really look forward to watching.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Justin.
All right, that'll do it for today's edition of Inside Baylor Sports, a Sport and Story production. Thanks for listening. For Corey Bolts, I'm Justin Hoff. Have a great Thursday and Sick 'em Bears.